Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Kuf Lamed in Baba Basra, as we learn for Achenu called Beis Yisrael and Asuna Batzar V'Shivya. Says the Gemara from the top of the page, the Mishnah. We've learned before that what's the order of Yerusha? Of course, if a man has sons, the Yerusha first goes to his sons, not to the daughters. Minatorah, of course. If he has no sons and he has daughters, it goes to his daughters, like Benos Safchad. Let's say a man says, apparently this is what the Mishnah means. I have a daughter, but I like to give it to somebody else, a friend of mine. And he should as a Yerusha. Now, of course, when you're alive, you can give it away whatever you want. You can give it as a gift. But if you want it to be Torah's Yerusha, which takes effect automatically at the second of death, goes automatically to the way the Torah prescribes it. First sons, then no sons goes to daughters. If not, goes to his father. If he has no father, it goes down to his father's children, etc., etc. So if he says here, I don't want it to go to my daughters, who I have daughters. I have no sons, but I have daughters, but I want it to go to somebody else. Or I have a son, but I want it to go to my daughters. Lo Amar Klum. Why? Because he made a condition against the Torah. You can't do that. The Torah says that if you die and there is no will, you didn't give it away before, you didn't sign it to other people before, but simply a man died with no instructions, it goes automatically to his sons, not to his daughters. And if he only has daughters, it goes to the daughters, not to anybody else. Therefore, what he said here is meaningless. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, apparently Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka is arguing, the Gemara will discuss this, Omer, if he gives it to somebody who is ra'ui to Yorishim, who's fit to Yorishim, what does that mean? That works. That means to say, sounds like it means to say this. Let's say he says he has 4 sons, and nobody's a Bechor, let's assume. He just has 4 sons, and he wants to give it to one of them, not to all of them, not to divide it equally among them, but rather give it one of them. Apparently it works. But if he gives it, let's say, where he has sons and he has daughters, and he wants to give it to one of the daughters, then it doesn't work. Now, there's Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka arguing with the Tanna Kama that we're going to see. Says the Gemara, Taima the Achim Makam Abbas. The way the Mishnah reads, the Tanna Kama says, if he says, I want somebody else to inherit me, to be my heir in place of my daughters, that doesn't work. You're going against the Torah. Or bas makam ben, or you want to give it to the daughter when there's a son. That doesn't work in the Torah. Ben abanim. But if, let's say, one of the sons, he has 4 sons, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, none of them are Bechor, let's assume. If he wants to give it to one of the sons, or bas ben abanim, so he has like the 5 daughters of Slavchad, he wants to give it to Noah, one of them, Barav Kayamin. That's what it sounds like. Right? That it sounds like you can't give it to a friend, to a stranger when there's a daughter. You can't give it to the daughter where there's a son. Ema Seifa, and of course it goes according to the father, right? The father goes to Yerusha. The wife does not inherit, as we saw in the first Mishnah in the Perek. Wife doesn't inherit a husband. The husband doesn't inherit a wife. Here we're talking about a simple Yerusha, the father giving it to sons, daughters, or somebody else. Ema Seifa, so that's what the Tanna Kama is mashma, that if you wanted to give it one of the sons, he has several sons, or one of the daughters, you could give it all to them. Ema Seifa. But the Seifa says, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer, Imam Al Misha Roy Liyarsho Rav Kayaman. If he said this about somebody who is fit to Yarshim, for example, he has 4 sons and he wants to give it to son number 2 or son number 3, mashma, it does work. Imam Misha Roy Liyarsho Kayaman. Tanna Kama, that's really what the Tanna Kama says too. The Tanna Kama only prohibits giving it to somebody else when you have a son, or giving it to a daughter when there is a son. But if you're giving it to one of the sons or one of the daughters, mashma, okay, that's the same as the kind of Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka is adding on afilu achar b'makam abbas ubas makam ben. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan says, listen, he's even to say when he says Imam Elisha Roy Liyarsho means maybe somebody else. Let's say he has a brother. A brother is fit to inherit him if all his children die, or his daughter is fit to inherit him if all his sons die. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka is even saying that too, that also works. The bas makam ben kamar, Batanya, but we learn that Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka's own son, Rabbi Shmuel, didn't learn that way. Batanya Rabbi Shmuel Barosh Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka Omer lo nechlaku Abba b'chacham. He said, my father, Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, that is, and the Chacham did not argue al achar makam abbas bas makam ben when it's somebody who is not fit, and let's say a brother or somebody else when there's a daughter, or a daughter when there's a son. He didn't say that works. Shalom Amar Klum. They don't disagree about that. He agrees with the Chachamim that if you said when you have sons, I want a daughter to Yarshim, again as a Yerusha, not as a Matan, as a Yerusha, or somebody else Makam when you have a daughter, give it to somebody else, a brother, let's say, a brother of the father, the deceased, everybody agrees with that. Our machlokas is al ben abanim, bas ben abanos. The machlokas, again, Rabbi Shmuel bar Yochai, the son of Rabbi Yochai, is saying, what's the machlokas between my father and the chachamim? Al ben abanim, bas ben abanos. If I can you give it to one of the sons or one of the daughters? My father says that does work. Chacham said that doesn't work either. You cannot give it if you have 4 sons, assuming nobody's a bechor. You have to give it to all 4 sons. You can't give it as Yerusha to one of the sons. Again, you can give it away during your lifetime as a matana, which is really the way a will works also, as we've said, right? Even if it didn't write a will, what they call a kosher will, a halachic will, the fact that you wrote the will shows that you want to give it away before you die, halachically, and therefore, if you give it to one of the sons as a gift, that works. But as a Yerusha, the Chacham say it wouldn't work. And my father, Rabbi Yochanan Baruch, says it does work. So how can you say then that the Chachamim and Rabbi Yochanan Baruch disagree on ben abanim or bas ben abanos? His own son, Rabbi Shmuel, says that there is no machlokas about that. Everybody agrees that bas ben abanos and ben abanim works. There's no machlokas. There's no machlokas that acher makam bas and bas makam does not work. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't say that either. The machlokas is ben abanos, that the Chachamim say that does not work, and my father says it does work. So one answer is since Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Rabbi Yochanan, is saying, oh, my father doesn't disagree with the Chachamim about bas ben about acher ben makam bas and bas makam ben. Everybody agrees that doesn't work. Since he says that no nachlaku, the Tanakama servant nachlaku. Whoever Rabbi Shmuel is talking to, whoever he's arguing with, is mashma that there is a machlokas. In other words, the Tanakama says, yeah, there is a machlokas even about that. That maybe Rabbi Yochanan Broka and the Chachamim are arguing dafka about acher makam bas or bas makam ben. Rabbi Shmuel, his son, says, no, there's no machlokas about that. Even my father says that doesn't work. Acher makam bas and bas makam ben does not work. Machlokas is ben abanim or bas ben abanos. Right? It's mashma that he's telling the Tanakama, oh, my father doesn't disagree with the Chachamim about acher makam bas or bas makam ben. Mashma the Tanakama held there is such a machlokas, so maybe that's the machlokas that the Tanakama holds that that acher b'makam bas and bas makam does not work, and Rabbi Yochanan says it does work. But by saying more, I could say that kula Rabbi Yochanan, really the whole Mishnah is Rabbi Yochanan Baruch. The Chasur Mechzer, it's missing from the Mishnah. The Mishnah presents it the way we have it as a machlokes between Tanakam and Rabbi Yochanan Baruch. But the truth is, it's missing, and this is what something's missing from the Mishnah. We've said many times that the Maratz Chias explains Chasur Mechzer is dafka because it changed the pshat in the Mishnah. It was meant dafka so that the Apikorsim would not be able to understand, or the Christians wouldn't be able to understand the Mishnah. So dafka left out parts of the Mishnah so that only those who learn the Gemara will understand the Mishnah. And this is what it means. Acher b'makam abas or biti toshen makam sheish ben lo amar klum, right? Doesn't work at all. How bas ben abanim ben abanim or bas ben abanos ben abanim. One daughter, if you want to give it to one of several daughters or one of several sons, ben abanim. Imamar yarash. If he says I want him to, I should call the chasav. If I want one of my sons, one of my 4 sons to yash and everything, or one of my 4 daughters to yash and everything, the Dvar of Kaim, it does work. Why? Sure, Rabbi Yochanan Omer, Imam Ramisha, Royal Yarsha, Dvar of Kaim, because Rabbi Yochanan said if somebody's royalty yarshin, man has 4 sons, they're all royalty yarshin, he wants to give it to one of them, or the same thing with he had 4 daughters only, he wants to give one of them, that does work. So according to this, there's no machlokas, because the Mishnah is simply saying the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan Baruch. Rabbi Yochanan Baruch says that ben acher makam bas or bas makam ben doesn't work, but ben abanim and bas ben abanos does work. So that could be the pshat in the Mishnah, that there's no machlokas about that. Or if you learn the first way says that Rabbi Shmuel ben Osha ben Yochanan Baruch says that that there's no machlokas about acher makam bas and mamas makam ben. That there's no machlokas about that. Everybody agrees that doesn't work. Even my father. The machlokas is ben abanim or bas ben abanos, and as Rabbi Yochanan clearly says, according to everybody, Rabbi Yochanan clearly says that ben abanim and bas ben abanos does work. Everybody says that does work. The shaila is, what about would Rabbi Yochanan Baruch even be saying that acher makam bas or bas makam ben would work? Well, maybe the Tana who argues with Rav Shmuel ben Yochai maybe says that, or maybe that's not the machlokas at all. Maybe there is no machlokas, and we're simply giving the opinion of Yochanan ben Broka that bas ben banos works, ben abanim works, but achar makom bas or bas makom em does not work. Amar Rabbi Shmuel lach Rav Yochanan ben Broka, lach Rav Yochanan and Rashbam and Tosas points out lach Rav Yochanan in the dafka ben abanim ubas ben abanos kipir Rav Shmuel. In other words, that seems to be the halacha that achar b'makom habas or bas makom ben does not work as Yerusha, and this we pass like Rav Yochanan Broka means that ben abanim ubas ben abanos that does work. My time, what's his reasoning? In the day that he causes his children, the day that he bequeaths his children, that means he's doing it. Father gives rishus to the son, father gives rishus to the father. I mean, the Torah rather gives rishus to the father to give the nachla, to bequeath it to whoever he wants as a Yerusha. Not as a gift, but as a gift. We understand bequeathing like in a will, that's a gift. But here it means, even in the halachas of Yerusha and Torah, the father has the choice of giving it to whichever one of his sons or divided among his sons as he pleases. If he has 4 sons and he is giving out $1,000 as his Yerusha, he doesn't have to give $250 to each one equally. He can give one more, one less, depending on whatever he decides, whatever he commands. Amalei Abaya, we have another pasuk in that parsha which talks about you cannot choose a bechor out of your sons. If you have several sons and it goes according to the father, that means the father can only really have one bechor. If he has several wives, he can have several pidyon habens, depending on the mother. But the bechor goes according to the father. Bechor goes according to the father. So he cannot choose one son over another to appoint him as the bechor. The bechor is his firstborn. Rashis Oni, Rashis is strength, his firstborn son. If his son is the firstborn, that's the bechor. So Abaye says, what do I need the pasuk of Mechil's bottom? It says, meaning I can't choose. The bechor gets a double share. Double share means, of course, as we've said, if there are 2 sons, you divide it into 3, the Yerusha, and he takes 2 out of the 3. If there's 3 sons, you divide it into 4, and he takes 2 of those shares. If there's 4 sons, divide it into 5, and he gets 2 of those shares. So the bechor you can't change that. He has a right to his double share, his second share as a bechor. He has a right to. So it says you can't choose to give the bechor share to somebody else. You can't choose to make somebody else the bechor nafka. But mashma that the regular shares that they would divide up, you could have a choice. It says no. Haomi boile that lo yichol vakers to teach me a different verse. Like at Tanya, Avachanan Amar Shema Blazer says as follows. Returning now to Amid Beis. The pasuk says lo yichol vaker. Lo yichol vaker matam melomer. What does that teach me? The Fish number says v'hayu ban chilas banav. Since it says when he decides to give as a Yerusha to his sons, and he can decide which he wants to shiachol, I might think. Balo dinu l'chara thinking of it as a kal v'chomer. Ma pashit. Pashit means a regular, common son, not a bechor. Anyone who's not a bechor is called a pashit. Uma pashit shiafa koko, who has a greater strength. Shenotu baroy kamamuchsa. He gets shares. His regular share goes even stuff which is not extant at the time of death, but even stuff that's going to come later on. Let's say after his father dies, some great uncle dies and leaves a Yerusha. That's called Roy. It's qualified. It's fit to come as a Yerusha, but it's not here yet. But a bechor gets all the sons share in that equally. So a pashut, he has a greater strength than a bechor. Bechor doesn't get a double share in that, in any property assets that are going to come into the Yerusha subsequent to the death of the father. So a pashut, a regular son, who has a greater strength, because he gets ro'i k'bemuchsek hatorah nasan rishuslav lahan k'lacham. Still, even though the son is stronger, meaning the regular pashut share is stronger in the sense that he gets ro'i k'bemuchsek, not only the stuff that's here at the time of death, but even other stuff that's going to come in later also. So he's stronger in that sense. And still the Torah says you could decide if you have 4 sons, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, you can decide to give everything to Levi or everything to Yehuda or divide it any way you want. The father has that rishus, even though the son has a stronger strength because he makes Roy Kamusik. Bechor, Sharahorakachus, that has a worse strength, that has a lesser strength. He doesn't get a double share in that. Lo Koshkein, certainly the father should be able to choose. Talmud Lomar, to choose who's going to be his Bechor. Talmud Lomar, you can't choose who's going to be the Bechor. You can't take away the double share, the second share, the double share that the son, that the bechor gets, you can't take that away from him. So that's what we need lo yochel labaka for. Since I have the father can give out to everyone's, to the common shares. He can give that out. He can distribute that however he pleases, even though the commoners have a greater strength that they take broi k'muchsek. So I might think certainly by the bechor that the father can decide. Kamashma no lo yuchel labaka. That's only the pasuk. So the Gemara says the verse. Lo yomer lo yuchel labaka. So say the pasuk lo yuchel labaka, teaching me what that the father cannot choose who's the bechor is going to be. Why did what do you need that for? So what do you need pasuk right? If the father cannot choose, it says he cannot choose the bechor. It's mashma that he could choose the common shares. What do you need for? Think like this. Ma bechor. That has a worse strength, as we said before. Doesn't get very well. So you can't take it away from the bechor. You can't take away his double share, second share. Pashut shiyafakocho, a pashut that has a greater strength. That he takes something that has the potential to be a Yerusha later on after the father died. That's going to come into the estate after the father died, and he gets a share in that. Well, Koshkein, certainly you should be able to take away his share. That's why you need the pasuk of Vayom and Chilas Banav, that despite the fact that the commoners have a certain strength that the bechor doesn't have, but you still can give out, you could take that away and give it to whichever sons you want, distribute it any way you see fit. That's why I need the two psukim for. In other words, you tell me that bechor, you can't take away his share, and the regular commoner, you could take a share, you might think the reverse based on these psukim. Amar Rav Zreika, Amar Bami, Amar Rav Chanina, Amar Rav Yanai, Amar Rebbe, halacha Rav Yochanan, halachas like Rav Yochanan, ben Broka, again, like Rashbam, and like Tosa said, in the sense that a father could choose to give as a Yerusha once to one son among several, or to two sons among several. He could choose whoever he wants, or to one daughter among daughters, but not that he cannot give to somebody else when he has a daughter, a stranger, or a brother, or some other Yerusha, or whoever he wants to. He cannot do that if he has daughters. Again, he can give it as a gift, not as a Yerusha. And he can also do the same with sons. If he has sons, he can give to whichever sons he wants, but he cannot give to a daughter when there are sons. Of course, today we have what's called takanas abanos, and today it's proper to divide it all equally, but you do that as a gift, not as a Yerusha. Amalei Rav Abba, Hore Itmar. So Rav Abba said, first we said all the name of all these people that Rebbe said, halach like Rav Menuka. Rav Abba said, no, not that the halacha is Hore Itmar, that he paskined in this case. He gave a hara. What's the difference between these two? Again, one heard that it was a hara, one that it was a halacha. What's the difference? Marsav halacha, one says it's to say halacha, because that's like a permanent halacha. Marsav Maisa Rav. Hora means he paskined in a certain case. Better to give a sword from Maisa, because the halacha, you heard the halacha, maybe you heard it wrong. But if you paskin in a specific case, that's like halacha lemaisa, so you go with that. However, this is not so simple either. Tana Rabbanan. Ain't the maiden halacha. You can't paskin halacha lamipi lomed or Talmud. Some of the girsa can't learn halacha just based on a statement in the Gemara, something you learn. Lamipi maisa, not even from a maisa that the rabbi paskin in that case. Maybe the case is there's got some particular angle to it, and he paskin away. Until they say halacha lemaisa, this is halacha lemaisa, like the Shulchan Aruch. Shal v'amrlo halacha lemaisa. If he asked the Shaila and they said halacha lemaisa, this is halacha yelech b'yasa maisa again lemaisa, or v'vad shlo yedama, but don't compare one to another. You know, as if they tell you in a specific case the halacha lemaisa is what you do. You shouldn't say, well, I heard it in this case, I'm going to apply it in another case. My v'vad shlo yedama. What do you mean you can't compare? Throughout all of Shas, all we do is we compare one case to another to learn. When it comes to tarfus, the treifa, you can't paskin. Well, since if it's got here, if there's a puncture over here, it's a treifa. Therefore, it's a treifa in another case. Tanya ein omer betreifas zu doma zu. You can't. When it comes to treifas, you can't paskin. Everything goes by halacha l'moshmi Sinai. This is a treifa. This is a treifa. Is an animal that's going to die within 12 months. And a treif, obviously, you can't eat. It's usher to eat that. You can't eat it. It's what we call treif. When we say in English, we say this is treif, we really mean doesn't have a hashgacha. It doesn't. It's most of the time it's an avela. Like if you eat at McDonald's, if you had a hamburger, that's not a treifa. It's an avela. It was let's say cow meat, whatever animal meat that wasn't from a pig or a horse or a camel. it was from a cow, but it wasn't properly slaughtered, and therefore it's nevelim. We call that all treifa. As a general rule, we call anything you can't eat treifa. But treifa really means an animal that, say, has a punctured lung that's not going to live for 12 months, or any other treifa, a leg that's cut off at a certain point, or an arm, or whatever, that's going to cause the animal to die. That's a treifa. So he says, "Hey, no treifa sul domazu," and don't be amazed by this. As an animal, if you cut it over here, it will live, it will die within 12 months. It's a treifa. And if you cut it on the other side, it's going to live. So when it comes to treifas, you can't compare one to another. You have to know specifically what's the halacha l'mosh misinai and what is the halacha for that. So that means you can't compare. But in general, you could compare. You said this is the halacha, let's say, for Yontif, you can apply it to Shabbos or whatever. Halachas within Shabbos, within Yontif, you can compare. And that's how we learn Torah. Amar Rav Asi told Rav Yochanan, Ki Amalon Mar Halacha Hachi Navid Maisa. If Rav Asi said to Rav Yochanan, who was his teacher, when you tell us that this is the halacha, can we paskin based on that and perform a maisa and actually carry it out and do something based on what you said? Amar Lo Savidu Adamin Halacha Maisa. Don't do anything. Don't follow and actually do an action on something until I say halacha l'maisa. Until I say halacha l'maisa. If I don't say halacha l'maisa, don't follow that rule. I might say this is halacha, but if you want to actually do something, perform something, do something, or not do something, do it only if I say halacha l'maisa. Amalu Rava Rav Papa Ulu Rafuna Breid Rav Shua Ki Asi Piska Dadina Didi L'Chamaychu. When you're psak din for me in front of you, and you have a reason to refute it. You see a kasha on my halacha. I paskin, I gave a psak halacha. Here it is, and you have a reason to refute it. You don't like it. Lo tikru, don't tear up my psak din. Ada until you come before me. Iisli taima. If I have a reason to answer your refutation, I'll give you a reason. I'll explain. I'll answer your question, and you'll understand my psak halacha. Be low, and if I don't have an answer for you, you have a good kasha. Hadrana be, I will retract my opinion. La'achamisa, though, after I die, and the psak halacha comes before you that I paskin, and you have a similar question in front of you, lo mikriko, don't tear up my psak halacha, because I did paskin that way. But also don't base it as your psak. Don't learn from my psak. Why? Lo mikritikrin, don't tear it up. Had I been alive, had I been there, maybe I'll give you a reason to answer your kasha, to answer your refutation, and you would accept it. But nigmer nami lo tigmer mini. But also don't learn from my psak halacha, and don't base your psak based on that. The ein l'dayin elamasha ein avros. We have a famous klal: a dayan can only judge based on what his eye sees. Meaning, every case could be different. He has to judge based on what he sees today. What he sees today is one thing. So if we have a psak halacha from hundreds of years ago that might have applied over there for some reason, you wouldn't necessarily paskin the same way today based on what he sees. Maybe the circumstances are different. As Rashbam says, "Val tigmu lo minei ela kefisha datchem nota." Whatever you think. Dein lo dayin el masha ein avros. At a time like we learned elsewhere in Masechet Nida, these same ideas that maybe that's what he saw there is not what you're seeing today. Every case could be different. So again, if you see my psak halacha and I'm still alive and you have a pirchon and you have a refutation, ask me. If I answer it fine, maybe I'll retract and agree with you. If I'm not here, don't throw it out, because maybe my psak halacha would apply in other cases, may not necessarily apply in your case. So you have to judge based on what your eye sees and whatever piskei halacha brought before you and what you see in front of you, and based on the previous sources and the later achronim, etc., you'll make your psak halacha. All right, we'll pick up from here tomorrow, Mr. Shem. Have a good day. Kol Tuv.